Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky. We're back this week doing another episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated. For you new listeners, this is the podcast where we watched every episode of the G.I. Joe cartoons, the Sunbow, the DIC, the Extreme, and now we're working our way through every issue of G.I. Joe: Real American Hero, put out by Marvel Comics. This week we're doing issue 126, which is the big Firefly as a ninja reveal. Spoiler alerts for all you Firefly fans out there. He didn't die in the freighter. We were tipped off by the fact that they did a dossier during his death period. That was really weird and kind of gave the game up. But he's back. But this is a good one. It's a good episode. It's a lot of exposition, but it's one of those origin of stories. So it fits in with G.I. Joe 26 and 27. The big hey, I'm going to tell you my whole backstory reveals that Larry likes to do, especially with the ninja history background story of the Arishakage clan, etc., so on and so forth. So it's good. Before we get into that, I want to say thank you to everyone who has been rating and reviewing. It's really helping the rankings on various podcatchers. That's exciting. So please, if you're listening, you're listening on whatever podcatcher you're on, give us a rate and a review. That helps. It helps show the podcast to other people and helps grow the show. If you want to help grow the show, you can go to patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod, where you can help support the show. I appreciate you every month. On that Patreon, you do get exclusive access to the first, I think it's 50 or 60 issues of Joe and Joe Illustrated, where we covered G.I. Joe issues 1 through 50, or, we've covered them all, but the Patreon exclusives are behind that Patreon wall, and we appreciate each and every one of you. And while you're on the internet, please give us a follow at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Joe on Joe Pod. Say hello, say what you think of the show. Send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. I got to tell you, this week I finally put the lock on the script and sent out scripts to some of my actors. That's right. We're revisiting the creative well, the same wellspring that 2 years ago brought you, it was 3 years ago. Was that 3 years? COVID is crazy. But yeah, I think that was 3 years ago. Brought you, Cold Slither, Behind the Rock. Well, we're once again tapping into that creative vein, and we're going to have a good, fun time this mid-July for during the Cobra Convergence, which is happening once again. And I'm really excited. I can't wait. My players are all awesome. They're all super talented. It's a it's a fun concept that I can't wait to talk about, but it is a secret until then. And I'm just say I'm excited. I really was. I'm pretty happy with how it came together. So so those wheels are in motion. Personally, actually, when you hear this, I'm gonna be traveling. I'm back home in Chicago for a week, and I'm really looking forward to checking out some Chicago collectible like toy shops and comic shops that I haven't been to in years. So that's exciting to get home. So if anything crazy has gone down in the world of G.I. Joe in the week since I'm recording this, and since you're hearing this next week, pardon me for not having my finger on the pulse. But you know who does have their finger on the pulse? Our awesome sponsors, the Movies in a Meal podcast. They're hitting all the big movies, and all the big movies are starting to come out. If you guys saw Multiverse of Madness, that was great. I'm excited about Firestarter. I saw they gave it a review on this week's episode, which when you're hearing this, I think would have been last week's episode. But I haven't seen it yet, but I am excited to see it. So give them a listen and see what they thought of Firestarter. But yeah, Movies in a Meal podcast.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie? It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Penseriga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out one episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
And so we are, every issue of Joe on Joe Illustrated, one of the things we like to do for you new listeners is we have a segment called
You were saying?
where we look at other comic books that were on the shelf the same month as this. This is cover dated July of 1992. So Marvel Comics and DC Comics certainly had a ton of good books that were on the shelf. So we're going to take a look at some of them. First of all, over at Marvel Comics, Bill and Ted's excellent comic book is up to issue number 8. Bill and Ted, first of all, I love Bill and Ted. I really do. All three of their movies are legends and great in their own way. I never knew this until relatively recent. It certainly wasn't a secret. It just wasn't on my radar. Bill and Ted's was written by the son of Richard Matheson. Last name is Matheson, but I forget his first name. But yeah, like, so Richard Matheson, who wrote all that great sci-fi stuff, you know, Omega Man and a ton of Twilight Zone stuff and so on and so forth. His son, of course, did this wonderful time travel, you know, like this great heartfelt time travel story, and it makes total sense. And I really dug that recent sequel that they did, or the, you know, like the third movie in it. And I feel like I know they actually there is a new Bill and Ted's comic that just come out. This is the kind of stuff that should always be in a comic book. I know they were out of comics for a long time, and I want to say, was it Boom that brought them back recently? But now it's somewhere. It's not. I don't know. It's not there now, but it's a concept that is perfect for comics because it's got a budget. Comics have a budget, unlimited budget, right? They take you anywhere. So these dudes can travel through time and create anything. And what's more fun than time travel in a comic book, right? So I mean, the only missing ingredient is the music. But even then, I would say, you know, with the exception of like the whole God gave rock and roll to you stuff, a lot of their music in the movie, because it was their music, it's not really memorable, right? Even though it's about music, I don't associate their movies with great musical riffs. I know that sounds weird, but I kind of don't. Whereas like you think of a Scorsese movie and all the musical stings and cues, right? Or a movie like Baby Driver, and all his movies. Who's a British guy. Just did One Night in Soho. All of his musical cues, right? You think of movies and music tied in with that. I actually don't think that with Bill and Ted's. So I think it's it's just great. So they should be more successful in comics. Let's make that happen. What else have we got? So, there is a annual. So the summer annuals are starting now, right? So it's starting, back in, cover date July 92. So Doctor Strange was a Defenders annual, and Defenders as a book had been off the shelves for a while. So this was an attempt at Marvel to kind of see what kind of interest there was in the property. And it crossed over in the annuals of Doctor Strange and Silver Surfer and Hulk, who were parts of the original, the original team of Defenders. And I think there was a fourth. I feel like there was a fourth crossover. Oh yeah, Namor. That's who it was. Yeah, and Namor. That was the fourth title that made this little mini Defenders crossover. I bring this up because because it was this month, but also it was referenced in the really, really good Hulk Grand Design book, which is on stands right now. It's a 2-part book. One's Monster and one's called Madness. And if you don't read those Grand Design books that Marvel puts out, you should. They're wonderful. They're more indie artists giving their full take on like the full character's history. So from the Hulk #1 up through like they didn't cover Immortal Hulk. It kind of went up through like Hulk of 2010. I feel like they didn't cover the last 10 years. And it's these like snippets of their history. If you guys remember the old series, Marvel Saga, where they cut out they took panels from various original Marvel comics and then they put some verbs, some dialogue next to it and use those panels to catch you up on the history of the X-Men or the history of Spider-Man or, what happened in his life. It's kind of like that, but in full illustrated comic form. So it's not necessarily a narrative story, but it's these panel snippets and moment snippets. And a lot of times it'll be a big splash page that covers a whole year or 2 years worth of these characters. They've done them for X-Men, Fantastic Four, the Hulk. I don't think they've done Avengers yet. And X-Men, Fantastic Four, Hulk. Oh, and did they do Spider-Man yet? I don't know. I'm sure they're doing all of them. But they're great. Like, they're really great. The X-Men actually was so much. They did 3 volumes of it. They did, like, the OGs, then they did the All New, All Different, and then they did the more modern version of the X-Men. And all by different artists have done them, but they all have this similar indie vibe feel. They're really, really, really good. So I recommend them. And whether you're a veteran or someone new to the series, if you're new to comics, they're good because they kind of teach you things of the history of these characters. If you're a veteran, they're great because they just tingle all your memories. You're like, oh, I remember that happened. I forgot that, that Rick married Marlo and that she died and that she was shot by Rick's mom and, all this like minutia stuff. And it's awesome. So real big recommendation for that. What else do we have here? The Silver Surfer crossover. Yeah, the Silver Surfer is dealing, the actual series, it's dealing with the Infinity War, which is happening over at Marvel. And remember, don't get it twisted. Infinity War is not the movie. So if you love the Infinity War movie and you're seeking out comics and you want to read Infinity War, do it, but just be ready when it's terrible. Infinity War, the comic book, dealt with like twisted reality versions of the heroes, coming to life and attacking the real heroes. And boy, was it was hard. It wasn't great. Like, it really was not great. To be polite, I don't like the Infinity War at all. But I know a lot of people bought the Infinity War comic, thinking that it was something like the movie, and instead of getting Infinity Gauntlet. Wolverine 57, this is important. I believe this is the issue where Mariko passes. Spoiler alert, 30-year-old book. Yeah, I think this is the issue where our friend Larry Hama kills Mariko. I always really liked Mariko as Wolverine's love interest. I actually don't like that when they have him paired up with Jean Grey, but I know that's what the world wants, and I'm not a fan. I preferred it that he got over that infatuation because it just seemed more of infatuation than it was actual love. And then with Mariko, he found someone that brought out his human side, his less animalistic side, his less urges. But Larry went and killed her. She's been resurrected, and etc. So on here. But it was touching. It was good. It was really good. So yeah, so that's it for Marvel Comics.
You were saying?
Now we're also going over to DC Comics. And DC also had a big summer event in their annuals, but this one was where Marvel was like smaller events over like 4 annuals a piece. I think there were multiple ones that ran that summer. We talked about the Defenders one. Marvel, or DC's rather, was a big event. DC's was the Eclipso, the Darkness Within event. So this was their effort at taking this really, honestly at the time, an obscure villain. Eclipso really was like he had his own short series in, I think it was in Showcase or Mysteries in Space. I think it might have been, but it was where the scientist Bruce Gordon. It was dealt more like a voodoo sci-fi thing where scientist Bruce Gordon would travel the world. This is in the Silver Age, travel the world, and anytime he ran into an eclipse of the moon, he would turn into Eclipso, the evil god of eclipses. And it was always triggered by the soul stone. I forget Eclipso's dark stone. I forget what they're called. But it's a great idea. It's really a great idea. And what they did in this is they really established that Eclipso is powerful. He's more than just Bruce Gordon transforming into a monster, because it was a take on a werewolf is what it was, but like a sci-fi version of a werewolf. With this series of annuals, this big crossover basically established that Eclipso was a god level being of evil on par with the Spectre, and actually sets up that the Spectre is his like kind of arch enemy, cosmically arch enemy, and these stones, these I'm forgetting Darkhold stone, no, not Darkhold, that's Marvel. These stones were the stone itself was broken, and the fragments of the stones got scattered all over the planet, and so they were possessing heroes. These are how all the miniseries, those big crossovers, is kind of how they all work, right? With Armageddon, the Wave Rider goes to each hero and sees each hero's future. In this case, this stone lands and each hero gets possessed. And what it was Eclipso was trying to find the right hero for him to possess permanently, right? Better than Bruce Gordon, because Bruce Gordon always fought him. The cool thing was with Eclipso, the first issue, and there's a million copies of these in dollar bins everywhere. They printed a ton of them, but it was a great gag. They put an actual plastic gemstone on the cover of The Darkness Within issue number 1. So if you ever see them in back issue bins, there is an actual piece of plastic that sticks out on top of this regular comic book cover. To this day, I've not seen a lot of these that have the plastic ripped off, like where the glue has failed. Is a really good job they did with getting those gems to stick on there. So it's a fun gag, and Bart Sears did the main artwork on this. And it looks great. And so in each of these annuals, Detective Annual number 5, what else was there this week, or this month rather? There was a Superman Man of Steel Annual number 1. There was another one we saw here as a detective. There's one more here that my eyes are glossing over. Oh yeah, Green Lantern. There it is. Green Lantern. Annual number, it was volume 3, annual number 1. So it was this fun crossover, and it ends up, I think the big one ended up with was Captain Marvel. That's it. The series kind of wraps up with him fighting Eclipso on the moon again from last month. It's fun. Eclipso it's a fun. I think they should really put Omnibuy together of these kind of crossovers. I think this would be a fun annual or a compilation to put together, the Eclipso compilation. They then spun off, and Eclipso had his own series for 18 issues or 16 issues or something like that, which followed Bruce Gordon chasing after Eclipso and everything after that. But what it really, really did is it really established Eclipso as a good, solid A-level bad guy, or at least B+ level bad guy, which would come into play in the mid-2000s again with Eclipso taking over Jean Loring after she goes crazy and kills. They made her Eclipso. It's good. I like Eclipso. It's pretty good. Here's the Guy Gardner Reborn 3-issue prestige format miniseries we talked about last week, spinning out of that battle he had in Green Lantern 25, where he lost the right to be Green Lantern on Earth. And so Guy Gardner is trying to figure out what kind of hero is he going to be. So this is them strapping him with guns. Spoiler alert, he ends up with a Quardian yellow ring, and then has his own regular ongoing series where he's carrying a yellow ring, the Ring of Fear. And this was the era before they established all of the what they call the emotional spectrum of Green Lantern. So yes, it's based on emotion, it's based on fear, and it's based on willpower. But the Star Sapphires are based on love. But it wasn't probably for another good 10 years when Jeff Johns came along and kind of said it's a whole spectrum of emotions. And so, making a Sinestro core and making a Star Sapphire core and making this giant. So Guy Gardner getting a yellow ring was kind of a big deal at the time. That's the point of that. Doom Force Special number 1. This is it's a fun book. I don't know the origins of this at all, but what it is it's making fun of all the comic tropes at the time that would lead into what would become or what is happening at the moment of Image Comics, right? The X-Force stuff, the X-Men stuff that's just about to drop. And this was Keith Giffen doing a satire book with Grant Morrison's on here, and Simonson contributes, a bunch of people contribute. And it's like Doom Patrol, but Doom Force, and it's drawn in that super herky-jerky Image style, which we've talked about recently. That's kind of been creeping a little bit into the G.I. Joe books. So Doom Force #1, very available in dollar bins and cheap bins, but it's worth a fun read. You know, it's certainly never up in value. We also have, at this time, Batman Returns was hitting theaters. So there's 2 books called Penguin Triumphant and Catwoman Defiant that were on the shelves with beautiful Brian Steele Freeze covers. And also Shadow of the Bat, Volume 1, Issue #2. We talked about Issue 1 last week. That Shadow of the Bat series also was released to coincide with the Batman Returns movie. So these 2, Penguin Triumphant and Catwoman Defiant books, are you see them a lot in back issues because they printed a ton because it was, you know, a quasi tie-in with Batman Returns, even though it wasn't, you know, in name. It was just more, let's get a Penguin product on the shelf, let's get a Catwoman book on the shelf, to capitalize on what people were going to be seeing in the theaters. So that's all good. So yeah, so that's it.
You were saying?
And now,
mass is ready.
Oh, it's ready, Destro. It's ready indeed. G.I. Joe 126. Fireflies. I keep saying Firefly. That's weird. Firefly's face is on the cover, and I like this. I like what they're doing with this stylization. So they've got his camouflage on his traditional blue face mask, and within the camo pattern, we're seeing glimpses of Snake Eyes' origin that we've already seen. So we see the Arishakage leadership photo that we've seen in the past, you know, with a young Snake Eyes and young Storm Shadow, a real young Jinx, I believe that's Jinx, Hardmaster, Softmaster, and then the Swordsmith Onihashi, and then the Faceless Master. And I'm not sure who the guy in the middle, actually, I can't remember who I'm sorry. No, that's the Blind Master is the other guy. Yeah, that's it. And then there's a picture of Cobra Commander waving some bills. You've got the Hardmaster getting shot through the chest, you know, with Storm Shadow's arrow. There's an explosion. I can't recall. I don't remember what the explosion would be referencing, actually. And then I can't see what the top part of it is cut off by the G.I. Joe logo. So I actually don't know what that, it looks like dollar bills stacked, but I don't know what part of the origin that would be referencing. I know what the explosion is, though. The explosion is Softmaster's death in Springfield at, you know, Scrap Iron and Firefly, who Scrap Iron shot the missile that blew up the station wagon with Softmaster and tossed Billy his eye and his leg. That's what the explosion is. I'm not sure what these it looks like stacked dollar bills. And that might literally just be payment. It might be representing payment that we see. I'm real quick flipping through the comic here. Yeah, that might just be money that he got paid to do the whole deal. I think that might be what it's referencing. Anyway, so it's fun, and it's a good drawing. Again, I really like these Wildman covers are great. The interiors are warming on me. I'm digging them. I'm definitely not against them for sure.
Yo, Joe!
Firefly. Script by Larry Hama. Andrew Wildman, pencils. Randy Emberlin, inks. Bob Sharon, coloring. Rick Parker, lettering. Hildy Mesnick, editor, and a note on that later. And Tom DeFalco, editor-in-chief. So, this is where... last week, it was the diptych, and the previous week was the triptych. And it's like it was a weird thing to do, because it was just basically saying, let's abandon the Firefly story because we'll give it its own solo story. But now there's no Uno tick or one, you know what I'm saying? It's a weird thing to commit to where one of the stories doesn't carry all the way through. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you do that, so here's my thoughts on this whole last 3 issues triptych thing. And this actually ties in with the editor stuff, because this happens to be, for unknown reasons, this is Hildy Mesnick's last issue as an editor, and she passes the mic in the letters pages. But I guess where my thoughts are in this whole 3-in-1 story is in the first issue, one of those stories should have wrapped up entirely in the first issue. In the second issue, where you only had 2 stories, the second story should have wrapped up entirely in the third issue. And then this story, say Firefly, should have carried over across all 3 issues. So that would have been a unifying theme. But by dropping the Firefly entirely in the second issue, it just feels disjointed, and I'm not a fan. So one of, like, either the DEF or the, Toxo Viper, the Cesspool storyline. One of those 2 should have wrapped up in the first issue, and then dig deeper into it in the second issue. And we should have kept up with Firefly for all 3. That's my thoughts. That's what was bothering me last issue, and I've some reason I wasn't putting that together in my head. So because then this issue, which is good and I like it, just reads like a regular issue of G.I. Joe. It doesn't feel like a thematic tie-in with the previous 2 issues, where last issue absolutely felt like a tie-in to the previous issue because it was, but then it just stops. So here we go. In the notes, back in issue 124, this is 126, the G.I. Joe Ninja Force cross swords with Cobra Ninja Slice and Dice, and they're red ninjas. And at the time, if you remember, Snake Eyes, the fighting was called to a truce because Snake Eyes had a sword up against the red ninja leader, who they unmasked, and they are all like, "You, it can't be you." And here it is, Storm Shadow looking at the unmasked red ninja leader saying, "You, of all people." And the guy's wearing a red ninja outfit. You don't see his face yet. And he says, "I'm flattered you still recognize me after all these years, Storm Shadow." And for the record, I like this. I like the drawings on this page. It might be because most people's mouths are closed. I've talked about that. The open mouth thing bothers me. This is not a visual podcast, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I like this.
Yo, Joe!
And wham! A quick little reveal where he says, "Even with my real mask on," and he's wearing his old school blue and gray Firefly mask. Now, this is we haven't, listen, Firefly hasn't been around in a while, but these 3 quote unquote G.I. Joe ninjas, Nunchuck says, and Dojo and Shebang don't know him either. Firefly, who's he? Ever hear of him, Dojo? He's a mystery to me, Nunchuck. Do you know him, Shebang? Shebang don't know either. So, like, Firefly was one of the main Cobra bad dudes. Firefly did a fair amount of damage to the G.I. Joe team. If these guys not read up on anything, I'm just saying, they keep logs. You might want to get to know your G.I. Joes. But then Slice and Dice are also upset because they feel like they've been had. And he says, "We've been had by a pretender with no ninja credentials." So they're going into the fray. They're going to attack Firefly. And to their credit, up until this point, cough, cough, Firefly has exhibited exactly 0 ninja credentials in 125 issues.
Yo, Joe!
Now he says no credentials, as if to answer my smart butt. No credentials, you say. I wear mine on my sleeve and my fists and feet, and he's fighting. So we get some ninja fighting action. He says, "Shall I assume the cloak of the chameleon?" And Storm Shadow realizes he has secret knowledge of the secret techniques of the Arishakage clan. Not only is he a ninja, he may even be a relative. And Dojo is like, "Somebody please tell me who this Firefly is." I know you need someone like this in stories a lot to justify having people explain things, but I don't know. I feel like these guys should have a clue who one of their biggest adversaries is.
Yo, Joe!
And we get a little, this would be what would be considered a montage. And it's Storm Shadow explaining that Firefly is a mysterious saboteur and assassin. He's worked for the nastiest bad guys, including Cobra. So he's done a lot of work outside of Cobra as well. Nobody knows his name, where he comes from. The only thing we know for sure is that you should never turn your back on him. And then he strikes. And it references the Firefly dossier that took place in G.I. Joe 117 when Firefly was supposed to be dead. Therefore telling us that Firefly is not going to be dead.
Yo, Joe!
There's a lot of stumbles on the way to Firefly. It's not my favorite revelation. I'm just putting that out there. I don't know if you could hear it in my voice. Firefly being this issue is it's a fun issue, and I am all for crazy, complicated murder plots and this person and that person. I am all for that. I love that stuff. I'm not a big fan of this Firefly complication. So he strikes at Storm Shadow, and then Snake Eyes pops up out of nowhere. And we're still getting more exposition. In fact, most of this issue is exposition. Storm Shadow talks about, he has to answer for a lot. It's in reminding the reader here that Firefly was an accessory to the murder of the Soft Master. It's the same missile that put Billy in a coma and took his leg and his eye. They don't mention that he also killed Candy Southern. Candy Apple. Candy Southern was from X Factor. I used to make that mistake all the time. Yeah, he's killed Candy Apple and also was in that car. And the drunk driver. So they're all murderers. And that upsets Dojo, which then makes me go, come on, you don't know who he is? Because he says, he helped murder my mentor, the Soft Master. You're dead meat. Dude, you knew that your mentor was murdered. You don't know who did it? Like, it's not a secret. They've known this whole time. If you know your mentor is the Soft Master and your mentor got murdered, you should know as soon as they say Firefly, the first thing out of Dojo's mouth should have been the guy that killed my mentor. You see where I'm going with that, right?
Yo, Joe!
So Storm Shadow says, yeah, you're supposed to be dead. And, he this is, I see what they're going for here. He's like, Dad, I'll show you who's dead. And he does a big acrobatic trick. And it's like, oh, you're just showing off. And he's actually surprised that Zartan and Billy escaped. He thought they were going to die. He says he didn't linger. And we're talking about when he got locked into the freighter by Cobra Commander. So Slice says, you had the means to escape the buried freighter and you kept it to yourself. You abandoned your own comrades to die in the cold and dark. What kind of human being are you? And his answer is a person of infinite practicality and one not overburdened with useless sentiment. And then he's going to launch into a remembrance of that. I like the staging on this page. Not sure what the face is doing in the top in that top close up, but once he strikes this samurai, the samurai pose of the sword up in the middle, cut to the questioning by Slice, and then you get this nice focused tight shot of his eyes and his determination to tell his story of survival. I think that works really well from a storytelling perspective.
Yo, Joe!
And now we get the full inside story of what happened in the freighter. First of all, hashtag justice for Tyrone. No one mentions what happened to Tyrone here. I've read through this. Tyrone is not mentioned. But he says Zartan was taking command and organizing. He and that brat Billy were talking about a concerted effort to dig their way out. And he says that would have taken years. And he wasn't going to waste his life, and he wasn't about to endanger his own chances. So he knew where there was a stack of old battle android troopers. And these are actually referencing the bats from the Battle of Cobra Island back in G.I. Joe 73 through 76. And these specific bats were deactivated in 77. So this is cool. This is referencing specific plot points, from previous issues. So I like that a lot. So he reprograms all these bats, which absolutely works. Totally makes sense. They were busted from a targeting perspective, but they were still functional robots.
Yo, Joe!
And he orders them to start digging out. And that's what he has them do. So we have him, he's hanging from a hammock as they started to dig their way out of the tunnel. He says they dug straight through that volcano rubble in 3 weeks. He was free. It took the others a better part of a year to dig their way out. Now, I'm not saying he has to be a nice guy, but you dug a tunnel. You couldn't tell the others that this is what you were doing. Why did he? He's a really bad dude. Why would he keep this for himself? He doesn't, there's nothing to gain or nothing to lose by also saying to the guys, hey guys, I dug a hole over here. At least bring Tyrone with you. At least save Tyrone. And Storm Shadow reminds us that it took the others better part of a year to dig their way out. And by that time, most of them had perished from eating spoiled rations. So it really is a year of G.I. Joe time that those guys were off the board. And Firefly says, Cobra Commander had a complete list of who he buried, and there were only 2 bodies unaccounted for, Zartan and Billy. Or actually, I'm sorry, that's Storm Shadow saying that. So maybe...
Yo, Joe!
I think the reasoning, if you can give it that, is he didn't tell them about it is because he wanted to really be believed that he was dead. So he didn't want Cobra Commander coming after him. And so if everyone escaped, then Cobra Commander would know that everyone escaped. Having said that, I don't buy that as a rationale. I feel like Firefly would have been like, so what? Come after me. Like, you just tried to kill me, bro. Like, so what? Like, I'm Firefly. Like, he can handle it. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird and sinister. But it's also doing something else, which we'll talk about later. Slice and Dice interrupt this soliloquy, and Firefly puts him in his place to jump back to reminiscing. And we learned that the reason they thought Firefly was dead, there was a body in Firefly's uniform, and no, that body was not Tyrone, #justice for Tyrone. That body was the old dead body of Serpentor. Remember, Dr. Mindbender had Serpentor frozen on ice, and it was in that freighter. So he dressed up Serpentor in his old blue outfit. It's funny, he talks about my old uniform, and he damaged the head. So you can imagine him brutally beating the corpse of Serpentor to make the face disfigured, which is awesome to think about. But he's wearing his old uniform, so that doesn't have a huge impact. So it's like, okay, well, he had spares. And then he escaped, and he found in the Cobra Computer Center the records of the Silent Castle in Transcarpathia, and he decided to start his new enterprise in the privacy of its dungeons.
Yo, Joe!
And that's when Slice and Dice have heard enough. You can't be Firefly. Firefly was just a run-of-the-mill terrorist. The Red Ninja leader who summoned us to the Silent Castle was a master of the Arishakage ninja style. He knew the finger knits, the answers to the Zen koan riddles, etc., and so on. And so Firefly going into full ninja mode, and he says,
Yo, Joe!
because he's the faceless masker, and he pulls off his old blue and gray camo mask, and he's got a blank face. He looks like the Spider-Man villain, the Chameleon. He's got no face, no eyes, no nothing. And again, Shebang, Dojo, and what's his face? They're like, who's the faceless master? These guys are supposed to be Arishakage students. They don't know anything. But we get a flashback to the family portraits, and there's an explanation for this in the letters page, and we see that the faceless master is in the photo. But remember, in all the photos, he was blurred, and so we finally see Firefly's what presuming to be his normal face. I mean, it may not actually be his real face, but we're presuming it's his real face here on this page. And he says, "My blurred visage is unsettling to most. Here, let me assume a more standard image." So, may or may not be his actual face. But one of the Shebang or Dojo is like, it's sorcery. And Storm Shadow points out it's just a trick, a form of specialized hypnosis. He can make you forget his face from second to second. Your brain can't keep up with the signal cancellations between the optic nerves and the cerebral cortex. It simply registers a blank where his face should be. Actually, it's Firefly saying that. So he says, explain the blurred photographs then. And he says, simply, you moved your head. And Firefly is basically going, yeah, you got me. I got your nose, but then you got me. It's really just my thumb. The simple tricks are always the best. That's the move Superman used to do in the early Byrne days. Whenever he would see a camera being, this is before everyone had cell phone cameras, but when an actual camera would be being brought up, John Byrne established that Superman would just move his face a little bit, like fractionally, so that it would be real blurry, so people couldn't get a good shot at him. So it's got this page has this picture of the old Arishakage clan. We talked about this on the cover. I'm going to jump back to the letters pages to cover the note that Larry puts in there. It says, many readers assumed the faceless man in the family portrait was Zartan. He claimed he was at the ceremony where Onihashi, the master swordsmith, presented the clan with an art sword and, quote, somebody took a picture. Everybody in the group photo is either a family member or direct descendant of a direct descendant or a master. Zartan was never a master of the Arishakage clan. It's doubtful they would have included an apprentice in the portrait. The formal Arishakage family portrait, known to most readers, is the one that the blind master whips out in G.I. Joe issue number 62, page 10. This was an earlier portrait, and the blind master refers to the blurred man as Onihashi's assistant and an adept practitioner of the Koga ninja style. Zartan was never an adept of the Koga style. This, therefore, was the assistant who preceded Zartan. I've been saving up this one for years, Larry. Okay. I guess that seems, I don't know. So instead of it just being Zartan and that being an easy answer, it was Firefly the whole time, even though Firefly's never had a connection to the Arishakage. He's never had any of these connections. I guess, I mean, some of the seeds were there. There was always the who was flying the plane, the Fang, the helicopter. How did they get there had to be. It could have been just a random Cobra stooge, or it could have actually been somebody. So those questions absolutely were answerable. The somebody took a picture mention, that's true. That means there was someone else in the room, but that could have been a lot of people. But now with the blurring of the face on Firefly, you're dipping your toe into Zartan's world, and that's like saying, you know what I mean? And usually it's one person has one specialty, and in this case it was easy when it was Zartan with the blurry face. That seemed to make the most sense. So, for hook or crook, this is what we've been given.
Yo, Joe!
And we get more explanation here. And we learn that Firefly's father was a plantation owner and an anti-Japanese guerrilla in French Indochina during the 40s. He spared the life of a young Japanese officer who turned out to be the son of the Grandmaster of the Koga Ninjas. After the Viet Minh turned on his father and murdered the Koga Ninja clan, they took Firefly in, adopted him, and they trained him well, and he became the first Outlander to become a full master of any ninja style. So now Firefly's been a ninja before anybody. Okay. It was that status that gave him entree into the Onihashi swordsmanship shop. And then that was associated to the Arishakages. And because he was of equal rank to Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, he was allowed to train in the family dojo and study their secret forms. And he says, you ask, why did I do all this? Quite simply, because I had been bought body and soul by Cobra Commander. He gave me my very first suitcase full of cash in return for engineering the assassination of Snake Eyes. So remember the assassination of Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes' family, Cobra Commander's brother was drunk, ran into Snake Eyes' family. Cobra Commander blamed Snake Eyes and his family for killing his brother and wanted his revenge on Snake Eyes. So the chronology of all this is really, really quite a thing, because that happened after Snake Eyes got back from Vietnam. Then Snake Eyes went to train with Storm Shadow. And so this is now implying that the only reason Firefly was training with the Arishakages at the same time as Snake Eyes is because he was there to kill Snake Eyes. So he wasn't yet a master of this dojo, even though he says he was a master of the Koga style. And now
Yo, Joe!
we get to this next page, and we see that he was present. He was asked to help referee a practice match, and the challenge with Storm Shadow was to snuff out a candle before Snake Eyes could react. And Snake Eyes is sitting there with his back to Storm Shadow, and he's got a lit candle on his head. And Storm Shadow is going to swing the sword at the candle, and Snake Eyes' job is to stop it and keep the candle lit. So this is actually similar to the to that water technique thing, that same kind of like challenge where the answer is not really the answer, that they did in the Snake Eyes movie, which was one of the better scenes of the movie.
Yo, Joe!
And the sword swings down, and in the next panel we see that Snake Eyes catches the sword with the flats of his hands, and Hardmaster turns to Faceless One, who we know now is Firefly, He says, who won the match? Firefly says, well, Snake Eyes, he stopped Storm Shadow from snuffing the candle. So obviously Snake Eyes is the winner. The problem with this actually is in the drawing of the candle snuffing, something was lost in translation. And to my eyes, 100%, it looks like the candle is snuffed out. So this is something that I think they missed. Something got miscommunicated because that candle does not look like it's still on a fire in that thwack panel where Snake Eyes is stopping it with his palms. So actually, I thought it was the force of the blow put the candle out. But we see that Hardmaster strikes the floor with his fist, and the candle that was on Snake Eyes' head actually is now still on fire. It's the same page, so it's weird, but it's still on fire, and it splits in two. So Storm Shadow's sword did go all the way through to the candle, stopped at the top of Snake Eyes' head, and then was rebounding back up. So Snake Eyes caught it on the rebound.
Yo, Joe!
To Firefly's astonishment. He says if the candle was cut, then Snake Eyes didn't catch the blade until it was returning, so Storm Shadow's the winner. And so when Hardmaster said, well, is he? Ponder this, Faceless One. What if Snake Eyes had held back his skill? What if Snake Eyes loved his sword brother so much that he would rather lose a silly match than have Storm Shadow lose face in front of his family? Then who is the winner? So this is the moment, apparently, when Firefly realized he was no match for Snake Eyes. So that's when he convinces Cobra Commander to bring in Zartan as an outside contractor. So again, this
Yo, Joe!
seems to be overcomplicating an already complicated situation. And Storm Shadow says, you were behind that plot. Then you are the one who's really responsible for the murder of my uncle, the Hardmaster. But Storm Shadow, that's ignoring the fact that Cobra Commander paid him to do it in the first place. So it's really only Cobra Commander that's behind it. It's wild. But, Firefly is a bad dude. And he says, hey, don't forget, I also killed the Softmaster. And in order to answer our questions, which we're certainly having now 30 years later, and I'm sure I had these questions then, Storm Shadow says, I don't know if I believe you. Why hasn't your name turned up in connection with any of this in all these years? Because we've had 100 issues, really, because it was issue 26 and 27 when we first broached this. So we've had 100 issues, and Firefly's never been associated with any of this. And we learn, well, I'm a master of ninja mind stealth. It was I, in my faceless guise, who provided Zartan with the sonic amplifier bow with which he mistakenly killed a Hardmaster. It was I who piloted the helicopter for Zartan's getaway. And Storm Shadow hurls his sword at him. He says, well, it's you that'll pay for the crime. And so it's a little, it was me all along.
Yo, Joe!
And we learn that he hasn't been bound by tradition, nor has he been saddled with obligations. He's been free to develop the craft of ninjutsu into a contemporary science. And he takes off of his red ninja master outfit, drops all that trappings, and underneath, certainly it wasn't. I mean, his outfit. This is the big green Firefly outfit with, bulky grenades and shoulder pads. It just was not underneath the red ninja outfit. But he says, I've discarded the archaic swords and throwing stars. I've embraced the new technologies and expanded my arsenal to include nerve toxins, lasers, plastic explosives. I stand before you as the new Firefly. Fall down and grovel. And he is in his new outfit. I don't love his new outfit, but it's sharp. Like it's great. It's a little plain for me. I think that's why I don't like it as much. I don't know if I like just the solid green look. I feel like there's a little more that could have been happening on his legs. But so this is the new Firefly.
Yo, Joe!
And this is actually a great moment in this comic book because all the ninjas are just staring there nonplussed and they're like, we're not really impressed there, Firefly. And his answer to that is, you don't get the full effect without the hat. And I really like that. And that actually works for me quite a bit. So now he looks like the actual action figure. So he's gonna take everybody on. But before that, he hits a button and he activates
Yo, Joe!
his small army of battle android troopers. So he brought them with him. So he's not. So now, and this is what's neat about this, though. I will credit this, is because it's Firefly, and Firefly is known to be he's not known to be a ninja. He's a gadget guy, right? He's a, like they actually, I think they did a good job with him with Ray Stevenson in the second G.I. Joe movie where, yeah, he's got all these crazy gadgets and he blows you up and destroys you. He's not a stealth ninja dude. And that's what we're seeing here. So once he becomes Firefly here, he doesn't need the red ninjas anymore. He just activates his androids and they start shooting gas grenades, and so on. And this is great. He's like, I'm also wearing a gas mask, so I'm good.
Yo, Joe!
And the issue ends with him standing triumphantly over the crew, the gassed out ninjas. Also, the gassed out red ninjas, too, quite frankly. He gassed everybody. And he says, I spirited away this little prize, my very own brainwave scanner. What shall I have after I process all these skilled ninjas through the scanner and brainwash them into be my loyal slaves? I shall have an unbeatable private army of zombie ninjas. So, and we get a tease next issue, the return of the original G.I. Joe. So, also, again, another issue of the Ninja Force not doing anything. So let's throw that in there. They accomplished nothing in this issue. But it's fun. The exposition is fun. I think as a bad guy reveal issue, I think it works really well. It leads up to this is who I am now. It even ends satisfyingly because the way he takes them out is akin to his new look. It's not like he ends in a ninja fight with them. He's like, no, I'm Firefly and I use gadgets and smoke grenades and robots and stuff like that. And now I have a brainwave scanner. Again, I've talked about before, the brainwave scanner I think is way overdone, but it is what it is. And now we're going to see if the Ninja Force actually accomplishes anything next issue. We are getting the return of the original G.I. Joe. I forget exactly what happens next issue, but I'm excited to find out. We do have a gung-ho dossier drawn by Ron Frenz, of all people. This is a great gung-ho. Etienne R. Lafitte. This really is a good-looking gung-ho. I like it a lot. I like Ron Frenz's artwork. I think it's really traditional superhero stuff. It's really great. And then we go to the Postbox of Pit. So we read that note from Larry. We've got letters here from Philip Mack, Jason Kincaid out of Marion, Ohio, Michael Spelge out of Dublin, Ohio, Jason with a Y, address withheld. And we have a note here from management. It says, it's been nice knowing you guys. Our tour on G.I. Joe has been cut short. They were reassigned, but they didn't go away well. The new G.I. Joe editor, David Wall, assures us he's ready to fight for freedom whenever there's trouble. So, so this is Hildy and Kevin Kobasic. It's their last issue, and so we're going to see what David Wall brings to the table with next issue. So, so that's it. I feel like I'm not alone in this. I feel like there's a chunk of us that have also tried to kind of forget that they made Firefly into a ninja, Like it wasn't ever the whole Arishakage thing was never a clean backstory, but it sort of was at least wrapped up, at least with including Zartan. You go, oh, okay, it's a little much, pushing it a little bit, but okay, So, all right. So now we got Firefly in the mix. We'll see how far they push it. Listen, I'm happy to see him back and alive because we all know that the Cobra, the higher ranks, has been getting thin lately. What with Cobra Commander murdering everyone. So that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate all of you. And now you, Joe, enjoying half the battle.